Operation Truth. The show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. This is Lou Palumbo. This is Operation Truth. And with me, as always, is my co-conspirator, Tom Fuentes, who's a rather unique individual. Every time I talk to Tom, I learn something new, which is why I love talking to him. A lot of things have happened in the past few days, especially with the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. I love this word irony. I don't want to ramble on too long because I want to talk to Tom about some things regarding the Ukraine to get some updates and some other issues about how the discussion about Biden's cognitive state has left the discussion, left the radar screen, and so is this discussion about Israel. But I want to start with this whole thing with this attempted assassination. Universally, they realize that there's a problem in what happened with the Secret Service. I caution everyone not to be too judgmental. Most people are not familiar with this organization. I am. I've had to collaborate with them on a number of occasions, starting around 1990, with events I staged and people that they brought to the party, put it simply stated, including like former First Lady Hillary Clinton, former presidents, Herbert Walker Bush, George Bush. There are some exceptional people in that organization, just as there are in the FBI. Tom is one of them. I could rattle guys' names off for you, guys that you would go to war with. They're suffering the same problem, I have a feeling, as everyone else is in law enforcement, getting people that want to work. They also have a retention problem, if we're going to talk truthfully about the Secret Service. As of 9/11, they probably more than doubled the number of people they're protecting without increasing the size of the agency. Let me tell you a little known fact that most people don't know, that when they go on the road in these campaigns, sometimes they're away from their families 60 days. Keith Schiller, who used to work for me, he's a New York City police officer, went to work full-time for Donald Trump prior to and during his election cycle, and even stayed with him afterwards for a while, told me of the Secret Service agents being away at that time 2 and 3 weeks at a time away from their children. It may be good to give your marriage a little breathing room, ladies and gentlemen, but it's never good for your children. Understand the nature of this job. They work ridiculous hours. At some point, you hit the point where your productivity diminishes exponentially. I'm not making excuses for what happened in Milwaukee the other day. That's not what this is about. This is about to give you a little further insight into this agency. I'd love to know the age demographic of the individual that did the advance and handled the site, what they call a site agent. To be candid with you, the agents around him, if you notice, are all rather large individuals, which begs another discussion about the physical stature of people doing protection, regardless of gender. If you're 5'6" or 5'7", man or woman, and you got a body cover, right? Someone the size of Donald Trump, 6'2", 6'3", you're going to have
6'4".
a problem. He's 6'4". Okay. Tom corrected me. I'll take that correction. 6'4", even better. How at 5'7" or 5'8" do you expect to body cover a man of that size? And that's part of the job. I've observed the size of the agents around a lot of these people they're protecting. These are big boys. A lot of them are former athletes, like from football teams. I happen to know that factually, having to have discussions with them and bump into them from time to time, both professionally and personally. Don't be too judgmental, ladies and gentlemen. There was a clear oversight that took place there. Ultimately, that ball lie in their court because they are ultimately responsible for the environment of the people they protect themselves in. They can't pass it off. Now, there is no secret. They are overworked, which lends itself to a retention problem. They run these guys ragged. And by the way, they have a cap on what we call overtime. So let's say you're allowed 40 hours a month in overtime as a Secret Service agent. When you pass that, you're working for free. That may come as a shock to many people listening to this podcast, but that happens to be the truth. Tom will verify this for you shortly because I want his perspective on this incident as well. But I'm not inclined to hammer them into the ground. I've always had this mentality of identify the problem, the mistake you made, learn from it, and forge forward. Okay, then this agency needs to be visited. But they currently have a young lady, Cheadle, who is the director of the Secret Service, that decided She wants to make sure that 30% of the agents are female. In what world are you living? And in what government do you allow this mentality to exist? You pick the best people, regardless of their ethnicity, their gender, their religious denomination, their culture, their lifestyle choice. Period. You want to find the best people you can possibly find. That's it in a nutshell. I'm not sure they're allowed to do that today. I go back and I want to find out the age of the side agent because it lends itself to his experience or her experience in making decisions and following through. Let me tell you something about the protection work. I ran the Academy Awards in or around the Iraqi conflict. I ran the Golden Globe Awards 4 years prior and then 10 years after 9/11. I know my business. I was responsible for that property and every position around it, period. And it was incumbent upon me to make sure that everyone I assigned to a post was there and doing what I needed them to do. Now I'm hearing deflection all of a sudden, which doesn't bode well or reflect well on the Secret Service. They're trying to say the local guys were supposed to cover the roof. Well, if that's the case, it's still your responsibility being in charge of that site to go to those posts, including that roof, to make sure the local guys are doing what you needed them to do. We're hearing a lot of things right now. And Tom, I'm sure you heard this thing most recently about this police officer that was the sniper that neutralized the threat. He said that he had him in the crosshairs for 3 minutes and that it came from the Secret Service not to pull the trigger. That could lend itself to the background and the amount of time this young man or young lady had in the Secret Service. Policing, law enforcement can be a dirty, dirty job. It takes you outside your normal mode of living. We need to find out if that's exactly true. Because that's floating around the internet, ladies and gentlemen, please don't just assume that it's true. Tom, I want to bring you in and start to get to you a little bit about your perspective on this incident. I don't know if you saw Chris Schwecker, your colleague, who I hold in high esteem. He critiqued it. And everybody's...
Yeah, I saw Chris.
Yeah, that we're all drop kicking the Secret Service right now. There's something wrong in that agency. And it may not, I would say, be something that isn't fixable. But we need to get to the soul of it. And part of it might lend itself to this whole DEI. You got to get away from this diversity, equity, and inclusion and hire the best people. And the people that need to be brought along to be hired, for example, your minority community that do have, I would say there's disparity in the way that they're allowed to be educated, has to be addressed if you really want to get into this intellectually. But Tom, I want to go to you and ask you your perceptions of what you think took place. And we're going to both talk about Donald Trump if you want to see what a leader looks like, independent of politics and the fact that he's disrespectful towards people. Go ahead, Tom.
First of all, Lou, I would start at the very beginning. I've been the on-scene commander of tactical operations in major events. I was one of the commanders at the Atlanta Olympics in '96. I was a SWAT team member and leader throughout my career, all the way up through executive level. One of the issues that comes up always is this issue that we all have to work together. We all have to be a giant partnership. And so major events, no one agency has the manpower to do the advanced work like you're talking about, which was always standard, and to do the on-scene work at the time this happens. Now, one of the issues that's been raised on the internet before the assassination attempt was that the Trump people wanted more Secret Service protection, and allegedly were told that, well, not until you're officially the nominee, you only get so much. And because he's an ex-president, he does get Secret Service protection for life, but not adequate to do major rallies with 40, 50,000 people in attendance. Now, getting back to when you're the on-scene commander, what would happen typically in a normal situation like this is that you would have advanced meetings with all of the participants. And that would include, you not only have Secret Service, but you would have FBI, DHS, DEA, any number of federal agencies supply additional manpower to make up for the fact that Secret Service doesn't really have enough. Then you add in Pennsylvania State Police, County Police, Township Police, City Police, all of these different agencies. So now you have your meetings with everybody before the event, 1, 2, 3 days before. And during that event, you find out that you've got 20 different agencies participating. You're supposed to meet with the heads of each of the agencies contributing somebody. but it's going to be a representative. You're not going to be the head of the state police, won't be there. The county sheriff probably won't be there. So all these people will have subordinates in attendance, captains, lieutenants, whatever. So you have this big meeting. You try to identify who are all participants that are going to cover this event. Where are they going to be located during the event? Who has what responsibility? So you have an inner perimeter. Inner would be the podium area. And you have that big banner, stars and stripes right in front of the podium, which is bulletproof. So you have at least that much going up to maybe waist high on the president. But then you have the rest of the venue, which would be protected by people manning the magnetometers. Now, normally at most of the Trump rallies, and I've been to several, the magnetometer crew are TSA that lend people to cover that. So they're not even Secret Service, but they're going to operate the magnetometers at the perimeter of the actual main venue where the crowd is going to be, go through the magnetometers and then sit in the stadium or sit in the stands and attend. Then you have the outer venue, which is going to be how many places can a sniper shoot the speaker from and where in the locality. So you would identify, it would have to be a tall enough building to shoot over the crowd down into the podium area. And you would have how many buildings like that? In an inner city, you've got windows, skyscrapers, you've got an almost impossible task. In a place like this, we've seen the pictures, there weren't that many tall buildings for a sniper to get on top of them. Now, this is my speculation, but people in the crowd, not in the crowd, but on the outer part of that, saw this guy walking across the field with a rifle over his shoulder, going toward that building, that eventually he climbs up a ladder, gets on top of the building. And this person's been interviewed on every channel in sight saying, I was yelling at the police. You've got a guy with a gun. You've got a guy crawling up on the building with a gun and all of that. Now, the police officers that were on top of that, or Secret Service on top of that building, actually see this person doing a low crawl on, the proximity to them, and they see that. Now, what they don't know is good guy, bad guy. That's the problem. And I've been in these. That's why you see during major raids where multiple agencies participate, the FBI agents have the raid jackets, FBI. Then you have police. In fact, when Homeland Security was started, their agencies, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, they started out with those jackets, and people were going, who the hell is HSI? So they abandoned that and put police on the back of their jackets. So at least they were law enforcement identified. But the fact that they have all these possible different jackets, an array of uniforms and all of that, doesn't preclude the fact that you could have a good guy enter the venue, get on top of that building, do a low crawl to it, and be somebody on the good guy side, be a police officer from one of the townships, one of the sheriffs. A county sheriff might decide, I want my guys to participate. I want to get the glory from this for when I run re-election. So I'm going to send one of my young snipers up on top of that roof. And then meantime, you have the Secret Service agents first with binoculars, and they get down behind the scopes of their rifles, and they're radioing in. Who is this guy? Good guy, bad guy. Do we shoot him? And they say, well, the Secret Service couldn't make a decision for 3 minutes. Well, of course they couldn't. Because if you've got 20 agencies participating and assuming that the head of all 20 are not right in the command post with the commander, on-scene commander, and I've been that position many times, on-scene commander, you have all these subordinates of the different agencies, and you start asking them, who's that? Is that your guy? Our guy? What guy? What agency? All of that. And during the time of this roll call, you don't know if you've actually made the inquiry with every agency that could possibly be inquired with.
And I want to interrupt you, Tom, so everybody understands something. Now you know why Tom's on this show, because we've heard everybody drop kick the Secret Service for the past few days. And there's no question. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with them. But listen to how complex and convoluted these security details are that they're involved in. Listen to the number of agencies Tom's identifying and the fact that something like this could occur. The issue simply stated, though, to bring it really simplistic, there definitely should have been an asset on that roof assigned. And the site agent's responsible, as I have been my own site agent, to go around the property. I usually use a golf cart, to be candid with you, because the events I've done have been quite substantial. And I make sure every single person's on post. But listen to what Tom is saying. This isn't the cut and dry discussion about the failure of the Secret Service. Sometimes we become victims of our own device. I do want to say one thing about the Secret Service. The buck stops with them, as we're now learning right now. You can't deflect responsibility. But Tom, I want you to continue, because as you can tell from listening to Tom, this is quite valuable for the public to understand, because we're listening to even other Secret Service agents just kind of boilerplate come up and say the roof should have been covered. Sometimes you need a scorecard to keep track of the players. Am I right, Tom?
Oh, you can't keep track of them. You could have several hundred different law enforcements at that venue from 20 different agencies. They don't know each other. And here's another factor. When you're covering a major event, like you covered major events in LA, with your agency, what happens is that typically in an urban area, many of the people assigned to that would get to know each other, even from the different agencies, because they're in an urban area. Now you've got this place, Butler, Pennsylvania. How many cops are in Butler, Pennsylvania?
25, Tom. 25, now that you bring it up. But go ahead, sir.
Okay. Now, are all 25 at the venue, identified to all the Secret Service agents, identified to the other 150 police officers? So it's really, that's where the problem comes in, is you don't know everybody else that you're going to work with at that venue, at that time, all of that. So now put yourself in the position. This was the first thing I did watching this as a former commander, is I looked at this and imagined myself in the command post. I get a radio call from one of the sniper observers from Secret Service, let's say, or whatever police agency was on the roof that you knew was on the roof, assigned to be on the roof. And they radio you and say, we've got a guy, looks like it could be an officer. He's wearing camo pants, some kind of T-shirt with an American flag, carrying an AR-type weapon, doing a low crawl on the roof of partly the adjacent roof to where they are. Should we shoot him? What should we do? Is he one of us? Do you know who he is? Has he been identified? So now you have this whole array of phone calls that have to take place, and they don't know. So now now is what I'm saying. You're the on-scene commander, and you're being asked whether to take the life of that person. Do you want to give an order and say, shoot him, and find out you just killed the deputy from a nearby town? You killed a good guy. You see all of these police training films, Hogan's Alley, where did you shoot a good guy, a bad guy? The screen pops up and the officer shoots, and it's a, mother holding a baby or something. That's a constant shoot, don't shoot decision-making is a constant in tactical police training. But in this situation, it's the unknown. We've got too many people from too many different agencies that nobody else knows, including not even knowing all the commanders. So it's not unusual that you could have some small county sheriff that's agreed to help participate in this that wants his deputy to get glory, his agency to be able to say, we participated in this. So that's where part of the problem comes in, is that there's too many people, too many unknown people, and the guy with the two cops on the roof with the gun looking through the scope, having somebody's head in their crosshairs. Do they pull the trigger and possibly kill a cop?
And here's what I want to say, ladies and gentlemen. Now you know why Tom's a part to this show, because he brings a very interesting perspective based on his experiences, which I do the same thing. Guys, we're not excusing what happened, both Tom and I. My attitude is very simplistic in my thinking. An asset should have been assigned. Whoever the site agent was or someone he designated should have made sure everybody was in position. But please understand how these incidents occur. And I'm tired of them listening to them kick the Secret Service every chance they get. I've had a lot of interactions with them. Sometimes I've had a rub with them. I'll be very candid with you. Ultimately, they kind of rule the day, but listen to how complicated this can be. Now, I go back and say, we need to identify, which they probably won't do, the number of agents that were assigned to this detail. And let me tell you something about protection just for 1 second. I want to come back to Tom, but I want to explain something to you guys about mechanics of protecting a venue. You grab an aerial, like from Google Earth, you get a big overview of what you're looking at. Security is done in layers. You have an outer perimeter, you have inner perimeters, you have redundancy. You see my point? So you have to understand there's a lot to the mechanics of this. Oh yeah, by the way, every time you identify a vulnerability, I conduct what we call vulnerability assessments, site surveys. You can call them whatever you want. It all comes out the same way. It's about vulnerability. You have to have an asset to cover that. Now, Tom is pointing out to you, the Secret Service comes in. Let's say they got a 25-man detail with Trump, which I doubt they have, to be candid with you, which is clearly not enough. His own close-in protection team, based on what you witnessed, was about 6 or 8 people spontaneously converging on him. Within a split second, they were on this man. They did their job. We're now sitting back, armchair quarterbacking the Secret Service. And Tom is explaining to you where the fly in the ointment is. Guys, I want to make it simple. Sadly, one individual died from this, and it's heartbreaking. I don't even know how to quantify in words when 2 girls and a wife lose their husband, especially like something like this. But don't be so quick to judge. Guys, this thing about protecting people is very complicated, and it's, I would say, exponentially diluted by this notion of lack of asset. I heard a Secret Service spokesman come out and say, everything you're hearing about, they had all the assets they needed, they had all this. Well, that's just simply not true. And that's a CYA based on what I can see. But let me go further into this discussion so you understand the complexity of protecting the former president and an active president. There's an expression called in range of a handgun. In this instance, there's no way they're going to hand wand and or walk through magnetometers 20,000 or 25,000 people. And so we're all clear, the Secret Service deployment was in place probably the night before, starting to supervise the environment. And then exponentially through the window of time as they got closer to the arrival, they locked the damn thing down. And they account for as many people as they possibly can. I'm not making an excuse for what happened on that roof. But I want you to understand, it isn't as simple as being spoken to in the media, which, by the way, are at the root of the problem. We're going to get into this word called irony in a moment, but there's much more to this discussion. And if you listen to Tom, he's explaining a big part of this. A lot of people involved. You need a scorecard to keep track of the players. You can't, tragically, if this is your young agent, 1, 2, 3 years in the Secret Service, he's on the learning curve, folks. And sometimes people pay for that. Guys, I tell you something about my company. I hire active and former law enforcement agents because I don't want my clients or their coworkers to have someone learning their job at the expense of my client or their coworkers. There's a reason I do that. No disrespect to civilian, but you can listen to Tom. He can explain to you the value of experience as I can. You've got to be in the street. You got to interact with people. For me, it started way before law enforcement. I grew up in New York City. Born in Brooklyn, spent the majority of my life in Manhattan, and I spent a lot of time fighting. You develop these skills, this instinct, this intuition, this situational awareness as to when something contentious is around you. Please don't be too judgmental. I can tell you straight up, this young girl, Cheadle, she's losing her job. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They got to sacrifice someone. But don't be too judgmental. I want to further say, in this venue in particular, you had people that were in the stands behind him, as you could see. You had people immediately in front of him. I'm going to tell you straight out, a mistake that was made here. There were no pens for these people. When you assemble large numbers of people in front of a stage, whether it's for a rock concert or President Trump, you have to put these people in pens and create lanes in between them. So in the event you need to insert emergency services for an illness or a behavioral problem, that it wasn't even built out properly. And I hate to say this, but this Secret Service agent that was responsible for building this out was a little deficient. You learn from your mistakes, guys. The key is not to continuously slaughter one another because you make a mistake and I could put the finger on you. I want to go back to you, Tom. I apologize to you for interrupting your train of thought, but there's so much to talk about regarding this incident that's not being spoken to. And I haven't gotten into the word irony, but continue, Tom. I'm sorry, buddy.
Okay, when you talk about the distance of the people behind the speaker and then the people in front of it, it's very deceptive. You're seeing a view from a zoomed-in television camera that makes everything appear closer. When you see photos from the side, that's a bigger lane in between the podium and the crowd behind. That's made to look like they're right in back of him. He could reach out and touch them. He cannot. There's probably 20, 30 feet separation in back and the same thing in front. So there is that lane of separation that you won't be able to tell from watching TV. It makes it look like everything's compressed, and it's not that compressed. So that's one of the factors. So when you talk about who ran the site survey or the investigation of how to set this thing up the day or two or three before, we don't know. We don't know, in all of that planning. And again, having run these things myself, you can do all the planning in the world. The problem is when you bring in 20 or so different agencies from all over God's earth in the state of Pennsylvania and in the federal government, you can't control every one of them. And sometimes when you say you learn from your experience can work against you because experience tells you that the odds of a bad guy strolling across that open field carrying a rifle, carrying an AR-style rifle, assault rifle, toward that barn or whatever it was that he climbed on top of, the odds of that person being a bad guy in the middle of everything going on with all of the officers and Secret Service around, probably pretty slim. And probably that's happened many, many times where they're trying to identify, hey, we got a guy with a gun going across the thing, check him out. Well, they didn't have enough people on the ground to immediately brace this guy on the ground before he got up, climbed up the ladder and got on the roof. So that's part of the problem is there aren't enough cops on the outer part of the inner perimeter to actually check this person out. So he strolls across, and most of the officers that maybe got notified on the roof are thinking, it's got to be one of us. Who else? Who else would stroll across the field and climb on the roof of that? What assassin would do that in that manner? Brazen, open, not worrying, not a care in the world. And so they're looking at, it's got to be a cop. Good chance, it's got to be a cop. And that's what they're thinking is it might be a cop. So they're radioing into their command post, tell us what to do. We've got this guy. Can you identify him? That's your job in the command post to know everybody that's involved in the exercise. Inner perimeter, outer perimeter, rooftops, all of that. And so that's what they're relying on.
Guys,
one of the commanders is going to be able to identify good guy, bad guy.
Listen to what Tom is saying, guys. Listen to what Tom is saying. You create confusion and you create doubt, and that impedes your decision-making capability. Am I right, Tom? Once we confuse
because what happens is you run these over and over and over again, and you have them, even the most well-planned event still doesn't account for police officers that don't go to where they're supposed to go, or agencies that don't do what they agreed to do in the pre-event meetings. And that happens many a times. And we refer to that in the business as deconfliction. How are we going to deconflict? Who's doing what, where they're doing it, what their responsibility is, and then how do we know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing? How many sergeants, captains, lieutenant, whatever, how many ranking officers are actually at that site? So when you looked at the venue of that entire event, even after the shooting happens and Trump is, down behind the barricade and the Secret Service jumps on him, even then, how many officers do you really see running around initially? Not that many. There weren't that many right there. So to me, this looks like pretty much an underfunded, understaffed, undermanaged event. But to throw the entire Secret Service under the bus for that is wrong, I think.
I agree.
Because, and
We
to
haven't
throw the
even
commander under the bus in this situation. If I was the on-scene commander, I would not have told those officers, shoot that guy in the head. We don't know who he is, but go ahead and kill him.
Let me say something to you guys, just so we're all clear. Tom and I have not discussed this prior to coming on air today. Normally, we talk about topics we want to talk about. We have not discussed this topic. I find it incredibly interesting. We're both of the same mindset because we're both listening to everybody throw the Secret Service under the bus. And Tom is giving you a perfectly good explanation as to how complicated this can be for this agents. But I go back and say one thing to you guys. It's unavoidable. They're ultimately responsible. I got the memo on that thing. I'd like to know the age of the agent because I could tell you right now, the skill set when you're in the Secret Service 5 years, 10 years is different than when you're on 1 or 2 years. This is what an incredibly interesting discussion this is. And it's something that's important for President Trump to know that what happened to him wasn't necessarily the byproduct of one thing. I don't believe in single causality to begin with. It wasn't just the fact that, they didn't make sure there was a guy up on that roof. There's a lot of things that lend itself to this confusion. And Tom just said something that I agree with 200%. This is an underfunded, understaffed organization. After 9/11, the details more than doubled. They did not increase the size of this agency. People have no idea the strain this puts on your families. These promotions, these relocations, and what's something else people don't know? Generations ago, the agents went out on the road 2 and 3 months at a clip. People know nothing about this job. And I have to tell you something ironic. I was single till I was 54. I took the Treasury Enforcement Agent exam back in 74, 75. I wanted to be an FBI agent. I didn't want to be a Secret Service agent. I didn't know enough about them. If I knew what my life was going to be back then, I would have gone into the Secret Service. In all candor, I had the lifestyle for it. It's a single man's job. There's a lot of things that wear on these guys. And I'm not being a bleeding heart, but no, some of these guys are on the road knowing that their marriages are falling apart or they're missing their children's birthdays or graduations. Lighten up, everybody, especially the media that are ironically, once again, fueling the wrong narrative. That's what we got going on here. And I'm going to bang into that a little heavier in a second because we're listening to the media now say, Biden's rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric. How about your own rhetoric? You're at the root of the problem with the division and polarization of this country, and you do it without oversight. But let's stay on topic, Tom, because you can see I'm ready to go right now with the media because I don't speak enough to the detriment that they're causing, the harm that they're causing. Look, I'm going to do this anyway. Tell me what Joe Scarborough knows. He doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground, okay? We just stuck him up there to talk. Mika Brzezinski, tell me what's in her repertoire that gives her the authority to lead or guide you. Sean Hannity, Jesse Waters. Oh, they're both sides, by the way, of the spectrum. You know who's an intelligent moderator? Anderson Cooper. He conducts a discussion without really interjecting his opinion. What makes you think any of these people propped up in the media know any more about what's going on out here than you do, or myself or Tom? And I guarantee you, Tom probably forgot more than they know. Guys, this media is a problem, and we're listening to them today latch onto a story that, by the way, we're not talking about Biden's state of mind anymore and his ability to govern, whether he should run for office or remain in office. We stopped talking about Israel. We stopped talking about the Ukraine. And I do want to talk about the Ukraine today with Tom, just to get an update and to tell everybody that NATO is now going to fund them another $42 billion, which begs the question, what percentage of that are we contributing? See my question? But let's stay on topic with me if I can, because this is just incredible what we're living in this country. We need a voice of reason. We need a voice to everyone. We need to reintroduce common sense, logic, and reason in our living. See, civility, decency, and respect. Let's try teaching our children, starting with our children, because apparently we lost the big people. They're doing everything I teach my children not to do. But I want to go back to this topic, Tom, because you can see, once again, you can push my button on this thing because of the lack of honesty, the lack of truth attached to these discussions. So continue, Tom. I apologize again for interrupting you.
I think at this point, from a media standpoint, this is a bonanza for them to get ratings. And they've been looking at this, licking their chops for all week, what's going to happen, because you've got all the speculation. Is Biden going to get thrown out, step down, do whatever? Is he going to do it right at the time the Republicans are having their convention to steal their publicity, to gather all the news reporting away from that? So, you have them looking at this week as a ratings bonanza. They're going to get great ratings this week. Then this event happens at the Trump rally. Now they can't lose. They're going to cover that. They're going to cover the convention. They're going to cover Biden. They're going to cover everything. The hell with the Ukraine or Israel or nothing else in the world matters anymore. This is all they need to make sure they've got ratings for at least a week. So that's part of it. It's a feeding frenzy for all of the media to take advantage of these events.
Thank you for bringing us into the media, Tom, because, there's a lot of times we do this podcast and we talk about a lot of issues like the lack of transparency, the lack of truth attached to the border issue, for example, the lack of truth attached to the number of guns in the country, the lack of truth in regards to how we're addressing the mentally ill or the homeless or our veterans or our elderly. But this thing with the media, ladies and gentlemen, this is creating your optic and your narrative today. And they are so irresponsible. They're so politically influenced. I'm tired of hearing from Lawrence O'Donnell. He doesn't know his backside from a hole in the ground. Neither does Rachel Maddow. I mentioned Jesse Waters. Sean Hannity makes $45 million a year to get up there and insult the president. That's not the exercise. Constructively point out the deficiencies of this administration in an intelligent and articulate manner. And by the way, while you're running your big goddamn mouth, how about you offer us a solution to some of these rather than just pick? Now, some of the solutions to this are quite evident. The border issue tragically is simple to solve. You need to close the border. We need to regroup, galvanize our assets to determine exactly what flow of people we can facilitate into this country where we can vet you. Something that is inexcusable, inescapable, is the number of people that have come into this country we know nothing about. I'm not going off on that tangent. I'm staying right on top of the media. What makes you think any of these people in the media have the right to sit there and tell you what to think about, when to think about it, who to vote for? No disrespect to George Clooney. Had him at a couple of my events. Guy's a gentleman. He's very, very polite, dignified gentleman. Shook his hand, welcomed him to my event. His security guy I happen to know. I got it. You bought favor. You get on the Obama bandwagon. You raise enough money, you can become the friend of the president. It's like buying a friendship. George is not a bad guy, but he's another guy. He lives in a cocoon and in a bubble like most people in the entertainment industry. I know because I work for them, have and still do. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, guys. They live in gated communities. They have technology to protect them. And by the way, they have knuckleheads like me to parade them around in cities so they don't become victims of crime or inconvenienced. George, stay in your lane. You're a good guy. Julia Roberts, met her. Nice girl, talented girl. You're an entertainer. You're not an elected official. You're not a political leader. And please, until you travel this country that Tom and I both have, up and down, east and west, and both of us have traveled the world to learn about people and about ourselves, stop telling us who we should be listening to. And that goes for the media, because most of the media, and I did 22 interviews on the sniper shooting with Malvo and Williams, and Tom was in the bureau at the time. They picked my brain so they sound legitimate. Guys, I amassed a lot of knowledge, learning at times from people like Tom. That's what I love about living every day. You learn something. You stop learning, you stop living. Let me give you a little insight as to what the hell life leads to. But the bottom line is the media is at the root of this problem. We do have imbecile elected officials. There's a lot of good people in politics. We don't hear from them because the empty barrels make the most noise, and that's who you hear from, both sides of the aisle. I don't want to pick on Cortez, to be candid with you. I'd like to sit down with her to help me change things to make them better, not further divide the country. But just for the record, this young girl went from a good education in an academic institution to a bartender. And she became an elected official. Now she's telling you what's right and what's wrong politically with foreign policy, domestic policy. Please get in the real world with me. I've traveled this country. I've traveled this world. I've learned about this culture. I've learned about the diversity. I learned that it's okay that we're different. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Guys, you got to get in stride with me here and start to fix this problem. Tom and I are on a mission right now to go beyond this podcast, to create a network with some help from our friends so we can change the discussion here. I don't want to be contentious, neither does Tom. Listen to Tom. He speaks to you like a professor, like an academic, which he is by background. We're here to teach you about the value of the truth and to explain some of the truth. We're not picking sides. Both sides have issues in this discussion today, to be candid with you. But what's gone on the past 3.5 years Guys, I am feeling it dramatically. I'm currently renting a home, 28%. My utilities are up over 25. My water bill's up over 25. I'm gassing 5 cars. Okay? Please understand what I'm feeling with this economy. They can sit there and tell you all day long how great we're doing. We're just not realizing it. And by the way, if you want to know a little bit of this equation as to why you're experiencing higher food prices at the grocery store, for example, is because they get there by trucks. Diesel fuel is over $4 a gallon consistently. When the guys driving the goods pay more money and the companies that are supplying the goods pay more money, that's passed on to the consumer. This isn't complicated. I love this country. Well, we want to make you think it's far more convoluted and complex than it really is. I don't want to be so arrogant, but I feel like I could run this country with my eyes closed just by embracing basic concepts I spoke to you earlier about. Common sense, logic, reason, respect, civility, decency. Let's bring it back to basics, guys. Let's embrace this notion. How about one set of rules for everybody, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of your ability to buy your way out of things or exercise leverage because of position? This is what's wrong with the country. It's about our honor, our integrity, and our trustworthiness. And that guy sitting in the seat looking at me right now is the embodiment of that. This guy should be running the FBI, not Christopher Wray, who I don't have a bone to pick with, but I know Tom does. And I look at CNN today, and they've got this guy McCabe on. McCabe was fired. They gave him his pension. I don't have a problem with that. He's probably got a wife and kids, and please take care of them. Don't prop him up as some source of credibility, or Strzok, or Lisa Page, or Comey, or any number of these knuckleheads that have diminished the efficiency, the honor attached to what the FBI once represented. And they still represent it, by the way. We got a small nucleus of knuckleheads in the FBI steering the ship. Hopefully, this administration that comes in, if it does, will change that culture back to where it was. I don't know how much shelf life Tom has, or if we can dust him off and reintroduce him, maybe at least as a consultant. Him, Chris Schwecker, there's a number of these men. Guys, I go back to the Secret Service for a second. I'm going to name names. Jimmy Cawley was the SAC of the New York Secret Service field office in New York, the crown jewel. Mike Mooney, an ASAC. Steve Iannucci, an ASAC. Tim Maslick, an ASAC. Wayne Williams, the SAC in L.A. Joe Beatty, the SAC. And these are all men I know. Billy Noonan just left as the SAC in Dallas. I know these men personally. I would go to war with them. You talk about guys with honor that understand their mission statement. Problem is we're going through a cultural change here that my generation has its fingerprints on, which is a whole nother discussion I'm not going to tangentialize right this moment. Get off the Secret Service, guys. Give them a chance to breathe and give them a chance to speak. And unfortunately, I'm not 100% confident that this young woman, Cheadle, is the person that should be speaking for him. Let me speak to him for a minute. You heard me today and you've heard Tom. This is much more complicated than a guy didn't get covered on a roof. This is very, very complicated. And it's so easy to throw a stone, but I go back to this discussion about the media. Why don't you all just stop talking? For the love of Christ, stop talking. Words hurt. I teach my children. Today, before I came in here with my son, I said to my son, as I always do all my children, be careful what you say. Words hurt. Think about what they translate to before you say them. Before you do something, think about something before you do it to see what it translates to. You have impact and affect people. And guys, let me tell you a little secret. For all you knuckleheads out there that speak to your wives like they're borrowed, call your wife the C word one time. See if she ever forgets it for the rest of your life. Close your mouths. Think before you speak. The media certainly doesn't do it. Tom just pointed out the fact this has become the ratings game. They're riding this horse like we're in the Kentucky Derby, for God's sakes. Give it some breathing room. Talk about something different. Stop trying to impugn the credibility of the Secret Service. Hey, guys, they made a mistake. I got the message. Understand from Tom and myself what may have fed this, because I'm tired of them bashing the Secret Service. Guys, let me say something to you. The Wheels Up party, Cartagena, just so you know, I have my own Wheels Up parties, right? We end the security detail. I take a number of people out, and I spend money eating. If they want to drink, because my drinking's just all but done. I'm just done. But I let them decompress, because a lot of our jobs, there's a lot of pressure assigned to them. You got to let these guys breathe, okay? They've got a job. You talk about being under the microscope. We live in a culture. We just can't wait till they trip and fall. I understand America. I live in that same world. I've lived with that. People waiting for me to trip and fall so they could, I guess, critique me. What a luxury you have. I know, Tom, you've lived through the same thing. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you're a commander, or if you're a high-ranking official or something, absolutely. Everybody is watching you and looking at any little mistake you may make so they can capitalize on it. So yeah, you feel that pressure, as you go up the chain. In my almost 30 years in the FBI, going to a squad supervisor, you feel it because you have all these people on the squad that want to make sure you're a good boss and you're treating them properly. Then you go to the next level and the next level and all the way up to be a senior executive in the FBI. And the pyramid gets very narrow the closer you get to top. And, one of the things, I've equated that from a promotional standpoint of watching figure skating in the Olympics. You're going to be the most fabulous figure skater on the planet. You're going to get the gold medal and you're in the final round and you trip. That's it.
I knew you were a figure skater. I knew it all along, Tom. Now it's coming out.
That's right. I think like a figure skater.
There you go.
How many twirls can I make without falling?
Guys, I want to tell you something else about Secret Service, just so we're clear. When the visiting presidents came to the Waldorf Astoria, I happened to have protected a head of state. I won't get into why, but that just happens to be the way it is. And I'd roll up on the Waldorf Astoria, and our communications were jammed. The Secret Service, they have their own communications, their own encrypted way to communicate that other people aren't privy to for obvious reasons. We really don't know the number of agents that were assigned to the former President former President Trump, or even to Joe Biden, because there's a reason. They don't want you to know their troop strength, which is also the premise of how the Secret Service came into existence during the Civil War. The Secret Service went out and identified troop strength and troop movement and weaponry during the Civil War with the South. That's where this all came from, not to go back on a history thing. But you got to understand, this is not as cut and dry and as simple as you're listening to it on the media. They're riding this horse, give it a rest, let the dust settle a little bit, let them regroup. You know what? The government, not the Secret Service, has their fingerprints all over this incident, because I guarantee you, if they weren't having a problem hiring, and it's because of the demands of this job, they can't retain agents. Let me tell you something else, factually driven. I run an event, the Secret Service comes. The guys see my event. They look at how my guys are treated, compensated. 5 or 6 years in the Secret Service, they solicit me to come to work with me. I tell them, guys, my guys have pensions, they have medical. You've got to get that because I don't supply that. We have pensions, medical, being from law enforcement. This is an incredible agency. It was the crown jewel of law enforcement at one time. No disrespect, Tom. FBI is a different discussion. That was the job. Glamorous, sexy. It had all the allure. I got it. That's how they lure in so many young kids into it, to be honest. There's more to the story than what you're seeing. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. I hope you've listened to what Tom has said about his experiences in coordinating these very complicated, complex, convoluted, intertwined security details. This is Operation Truth. You can meet us at Operation Truth Official at, is it .com, Tom? I mean, I haven't said it in a while. In any case, we're going to take a break. We'll get that straightened out. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in to Operation Truth. We are just taking a moment to remind you to go follow us at Operation Truth Official on TikTok. You can also find us at Operation Truth Official on Facebook and Instagram. Be a part of this conversation and join the operation.
I'm back. I'm Lou Palumbo. This is Tom Fuentes, my co-host, and a rather brilliant one, to put it to you politely. And somebody's going to call him up and say that I'm acting like his PR agent, and I don't really care.
All right, keep it up.
Just make sure I get my 10%, Tom. Okay, because that's what they get. Any case, I want to 10%
of zero is still zero, right?
Well, listen, I always say part of something is better than all or nothing. In this case, it may be all of nothing is nothing. Anyway, listen, we're going to bump off this whole Trump assassination attempt, and we've explained, I think, a lot to what's going on in the country today in a very broader sense. And once again, that attempt and the fallout of it is symptomatic of a much bigger problem we're having in this country. In any case, we haven't heard about the Ukraine. Tom just asked me, is it still going on? We haven't heard about it in days now. I don't know if the Israeli conflict is going on still either. That left the radar screen, and they're both very, very critical issues. Something I may have mentioned earlier today, as I understand it, we're now up to $174 billion we've given to the Ukraine, as we have homeless, mentally ill, our veterans, our children, any number of demographics that need help here. And I believe in supporting the Ukraine proportionately. NATO's now saying they're going to give $42 billion. And I asked the question, what percentage of that are we participating in, right? But Tom, what's the latest with the Ukraine? What are you hearing on this? Because no one in the news has covered it since this assassination attempt.
Well, I think everybody that's, a military analyst or people that are in the know, not part of the administration, but other truth tellers are saying it's over, it's finished, and it's just a matter of time. And that Putin is taking his sweet time, just hoping that at some point somebody will step up and negotiate so he doesn't have to continue this. They still, even the other day, heard Biden say at the conference in Washington, the NATO 75th anniversary birthday party, Putin still intends to take over all of Europe and put the whole old Soviet Union back together again. That's what he intends to do. Anybody that knows anything about Soviet Union or modern Russia or Putin knows that's nonsense. He's never, ever said that he wants to do that. All he has said and has continued to say for the last 2 years is NATO should not become, placed into Ukraine.
And Tom, may I interrupt you for 1 second, sir?
NATO,
Tom, you may have heard it was mentioned that their joining NATO is irreversible. And guys, listen to what Tom just said.
I've heard that.
You heard that, right, Tom? So you can continue. But
and that's a red line for Putin.
Thank you.
Because he has said what that means is that NATO weaponry, which means U.S. weaponry, will be right on their border. And therefore, missiles can be launched from the border of Russia, from Ukraine, that will arrive in Moscow in about 10, 15 minutes max. Now, Putin is basically saying, no, stay neutral, no problem. We don't care what you do, how you do it, who runs your country, stay neutral. But this talk of, no, they're going to join NATO and it's inevitable now. Absolutely, they're going to join NATO. And Putin has said over and over how much of a red line that is. And I think, frankly, the only way Putin is going to be able to demonstrate is any of the weapons now that start arriving into Ukraine, whether it's through Poland or Romania or however they choose to ship it in there. I think he's going to start bombing the ports that they're coming in from, the airfields that they're coming in from, and just put an end to it and just say, that's it. We've told you not to be arming Ukraine. You refuse to listen. So we're going to attack you if you attack us.
Let me just tell you something interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because I've listened to former President Trump allude to ending this war. And I know he's going to do it. And I'm just going to tell you how he's going to do it. He's going to sit down with Zelensky and say, guess what? We're cutting off funding. It's over. Figure out how you're going to negotiate this thing, because there's no incentive for him to negotiate as long as we're feeding this monster. Number one. Number two, he's going to sit down with Putin and say, give back some of that land. We'll let you keep some of it, but give back some of it. That's going to be the compromise. Now, remember I said this on the podcast, because I got to tell you a little secret. A lot of things I say on this podcast, you end up hearing further down the road, which is why I keep saying, go back and listen to some of my podcasts. The things we're talking about today, I spoke about. That's part of what I think is going to happen with Trump, because now Trump has no dog in the fight. This is Biden's war. He's going to say, pull your horns in, give back some of that land. You knucklehead, we're not going to fund this abyss. An abyss is a seemingly bottomless pit. That's what an abyss is. And as long as we keep propping up Zelensky, he could be a tough guy. I mean, you have to understand how, I don't want to use the word retarded because I might insult somebody, but how backwards this is. As long as we keep giving him money and bombs, he can run around and run his mouth all day long. Take our support and it's over. And tragically, that's the same thing with Israel, which is where we should be putting our support, which is what we're going to speak to in a moment with Tom. But understand how basic this is. We sit down with Zelensky, Trump, and say, hey, look, I know what went on in the last administration. Right now, you start to negotiate and figure out how we're going to end this goddamn thing, or we're going to stop your funding and you're going to be on your own. And sadly, that's an approach. And for everybody else saying that, Trump wants out of NATO, that's not what he said. What he was trying to do was convince or leverage NATO into contributing their fair share of any type of undertaking to protect them. For example, he was criticizing Germany for being involved with Russia in commerce, and we're paying to protect them from Russia. Now, guys, so we do understand the truth attached to this. There are some nations that are in NATO. There's 32 nations, 30 are on the continent of Europe. Finland and Sweden are most recently introduced. Some of them are of more indigent circumstance. So I believe in being your brother's keeper. Has to be a case by case, but there are nations there that can contribute. Germany, Italy, France, the UK, just to mention a couple. All right. That's what the president's saying. So we can stop telling the lie in the media about he's going to withdraw from NATO or he's going to be a dictator. You know, this spinning of the truth really is sickening, and there should be oversight. And don't get me back on the media. That's what you guys are doing to me. I see you trying to lure me in. But in any case, I think that's one compromise. I think with Israel, again, not his dog in the fight. He's going to sit down. He's going to tell Iran, knock it off or we're going to nuke you. And I think that's tragically the value of this president. I'm not saying to vote for him, guys. I want all the big people here, put your pants on by yourself and figure out what's going on in your country and figure out what direction you want to take it. And when you do go to the polls, please think of your children and their future, because we're destroying the future of these children, this generation here. Tom, I want to go to you now about Israel. I want to ask Tom about Putin, just to remind everybody what a swell guy Putin is. Tom, if you would.
Okay, repeat the question. You want me to talk Israel or Putin?
I don't know. I want you to go back to Zelensky is where I want you to go. I beg you, please accept.
Well, the good thing about trying to discuss Zelensky is what's he in charge of? The great democracy, the George Washington of the Ukraine. He eliminated elections. His term as president expired, and he's the one that canceled having any kind of an election to find either reelect him or somebody new to run the country. So technically, Ukraine doesn't have a leader. So who's Trump going to negotiate with? Zelensky, the crook that's been stealing hundreds of millions of our dollars for his own personal houses. And now allegedly his wife has just bought some phenomenal yacht with a bunch of the money. So here's a guy that has become totally rich. And maybe if he's lucky, he'll live to spend it when the war ends and gets negotiated into a settlement. He may be able to retire and live large the rest of his life, or maybe not.
We'll bring him here. Tom, we're going to bring him here. You know that, right? You know what the end game is. We're going to relocate him here. That's what's going to happen.
And then try and set him up so we can vote.
Don't know what to say, Tom. The thing that's so interesting, if you listen to Tom, it's not what the media, once again, is making you think it is. Tom, please get into this chapter and verse about Zelensky and how oppressive he is in his own country with the church, with media that's critical.
Yeah, he's so much in favor of democracy. He's the George Washington of his country. He comes in and now he's locked up his opponent. Where did Biden get that idea? So the guy that was running against him is now sentenced to 10 years in jail. He tries to take out the church, and supposedly it's a Christian country and the original home of Orthodox Christianity in Eastern Europe. And he's locked up priests, nuns, and shut them down. Then he's shut down the free press. Any media that's criticized him has been closed and shut off. So that's censored. Turn that off. So all of these alleged things that show that he's such a George Washington don't exist. He's a complete tyrant in that country. And we prop him up. Now, I think, and I said months ago, I think Biden's been propping him up because he has all the evidence on how much of a crook Joe Biden is, how much crooked money the Bidens have made from Ukraine. And Zelensky and the Ukrainian government are in a position to prove it, and they've got Joe Biden by the throat because of that.
Very interesting, Tom. We haven't spoken about the Ukraine in quite some time. As you know, we went dark for a little bit because we're regrouping and we're approaching this a little different. As I said to you guys earlier, we want to move from this platform. I like doing a podcast. I like anything that affords us an opportunity to give people some truthful information. And by the way, Tom and I are giving you food for thought. We don't want you to be spoon-fed by us. Challenge us. Fact check us. communicate with us. We're just here to kind of help you find some light at the end of this tunnel. You know, the interesting thing is the way they portray this individual and listen to the reality of what's going on with him. And I'm jokingly saying to Tom that we're going to bring him here. We probably will. And all this money that's going there, there's no accountability. $42 billion more from NATO. Where is that coming from? Right, guys? And who's going to account for that? Tom, I want to go to Israel because we're going to have to close the show in the not too distant future. What's the latest with Israel? I know there's been a lot more activity on their northern border. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, apparently Hezbollah has been shelling northern Israel. Israel keeps threatening to invade Lebanon, invade, the territory where Hezbollah is strongest. I think it's kind of a stalemate at the moment because Israel hasn't invaded, and Hezbollah is attacking. They keep launching these missiles, and then you have the issue of, how do they take that as a spinoff from Hamas in Gaza and all of the hundreds of thousands of people that have been killed in Gaza by the Israeli Defense Force? So you have a number of conflicting stories of what is actually going on in Gaza and in northern Israel, and we don't know for sure. Now, one of the things that's very sure is that the Israeli media is really in a competition who can be the biggest liar, them or the American media. So that's the problem with trying to figure out what's going on there, because there's no truth coming out of that government, no truth coming out of Israel.
What you're hearing, guys, is it sounds like it might be as convoluted and dysfunctional as we are, just in a smaller dosage.
Yeah, except hundreds of thousands of people are getting killed in the interim. That's the difference. And so they can lie and they can do all these machinations. People are dying, much like in Ukraine.
And these are incredibly important points because there's nothing more valuable than your life, guys. In reference to Trump, and I'm just speculating once again, should this individual become the president again, I think he's going to go in. He's going to force Netanyahu to negotiate. He'll have that leverage and influence because he and Netanyahu are quite close, unlike Biden and Obama. And he's probably going to go to Iran and probably Putin and maybe China and say, pull your horns in. We need to bring this to an end. And it's you know what it is, guys? It's in everyone's best interest to do so. That's the irony of the situation. Nothing good's going to come out of this thing in Israel. Nothing good is really going to come out of this thing in the Ukraine, whether people believe that or not. People are losing their lives. We're dislodging people. We're separating them from everything that they know. I don't understand how basic fundamental concepts that are involved with logic and reason escape everyone. Tell me the good that comes out of this. You know and I know Israel ain't letting go. And as long as we're there to support them, as I said earlier in this podcast, they're going to be very viable and we should continue to support them. And I do know who they want to win this election. They want Trump to win because they know Trump will back them. We're seeing this country, our administration vacillate on this support and introduce it in ways that I don't think are in the best interest of Israel. That's just my opinion. That's all it is, guys. Again, just an opinion, as my opinion as to how this war will be reserved. Guys, we're going to wrap up for today. I hope you really came away with something good about what's going on with this assassination attempt, an explanation as to it being a little more complicated. Tom provided you an incredible amount of insight, having been a site commander for the FBI. By the way, Tom was in charge of the entire international operation of the FBI, which I think encompassed 80 countries. Is that correct, Tom? 80 was the number?
No, 80 offices covering about 190 countries.
There you go, guys. 80 offices, 190. He's been around the block a little bit. He's got a lot more mileage on than it shows, I have to be honest with you.
Plus, I was on the executive board of Interpol. So
there you go. So we got
don't forget that part.
We know some guys in some places is what Tom's telling you. Any case, guys, I thank you for listening today. We're going to be out here every day, every week again for you. This has been Operation Truth. You can find us operationtruthofficial.com. Please communicate with us. We want to hear from you. We're not trying to spoon feed you guys. We're giving you food for thought. But most importantly, Tom and I are agenda free. We're just latching on to the truth because that seems to be something that's no longer part of the discussion today. Tom mentioned it to you before. Ratings. Ratings deflect you from the truth. We'll say whatever we have to say in the media as long as we have viewership, sponsors, ratings, and money. We'll be back next week, guys. Thank you for joining us. Tom, thank you, as always. I learned something else from you today, you son of a gun. We'll see you next week, guys. Thank you.